My name is Cal Hackeman. I'm currently the treasurer. I am the past president and a past board member of the Stretch Glass Society. Stretch Glass Society is the only club that's devoted exclusively to the study and the promotion of stretch glass. We do not have local chapters. We have one national organization. It was founded in 1974. So if you do your arithmetic real quick, you'll say, oh, you're celebrating your 50th anniversary. And we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. And part of that celebration is to send me out on the road to talk about stretch glass to people like you. So here we are. We're going to talk about stretch glass. We're going to start with the basics. So what is stretch glass? Stretch glass is defined as being press or blown molded glass which is iridized while it is hot and in some cases reshaped. Okay? It must be made in a mold. It must be iridized while it's hot. That eliminates a lot of other types of glass. So art glass is not stretch glass. Okay? The glass that you see that was iridized after it was cold is not stretch glass. That's cold iridized glass. The reshaping, not every piece gets reshaped. For example, a candy jar does not get reshaped because if you reshape a candy jar, the cover's not going to fit on it. So the candy jar, a water tumbler is generally not reshaped. There are other pieces, these pieces up here, these clones, this powder puff, this powder puff, this powder puff, not reshaped. That's the way they came out of the mold. They have iridescence on them. They have more of a velvety finish, if you will, than a stretch finish. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So how was stretch glass made? I just gave you a little bit of a hint. You have a mold, and you gather some hot glass from the pot. You drop the glass in the mold. A plunger comes down and pushes the glass into the mold to form whatever it is you want to form. The plunger is raised after it makes its impression, and the mold is opened. A worker with a very long pole, the spring-activated snap on the end of it, grabs the piece of glass as it comes out of the mold, generally by the foot. So let's just say this is the piece of glass coming out of the mold. The snap is going to grab it here. That's how he's going to carry it around for the rest of the time until it goes in the leer to cool. He's going to take it from the mold to the iridizing booth. In the iridizing booth, the dope fairy, as they called them, sprays it with iridescence. Iridescence is a salt acid solution, which you're all probably familiar with. Iridescence has been around for years. I don't know if you know, but you can create natural iridescence if you're willing to wait long enough. And in fact, when they were excavating in the Egyptian pyramids in the 1800s, they found some glass that had been buried in the sand in Egypt, which was very iron rich. And when they dug it out, it had natural iridescence on it. The only problem with that process is it takes about 3,000 years for the iridescence to really get good on the glass. You do find some bottles in the United States. You find some bottles which are a couple hundred years old now that have iridescence on them, but it's not the kind of iridescence that you really want. So you spray it with iridescence, and then the piece of glass is put back in the glory hole. The glory hole is that part of the furnace that has a slightly lower temperature than the pots. It's put back in the glory hole momentarily. Now, you can't put it in there very long because you don't want the glass to remelt, but you do want the iridescence to adhere to the glass. And here's the difference between stretch glass and carnival glass. Carnival glass, the process is make it in the mold, reshape it, iridize it, put it in the Lear. Stretch glass, make it in the mold, iridize it, reheat it, then reshape it, put it in the Lear to cool. When you reheat it, it takes some of that shininess that you see in Carnival glass, it calms that down, and it gives you this very nice stretch effect, okay? Now, when you reheat it, the change in temperature causes the glass to move a little bit. The iridescence, which is sprayed on it, is not going to move, okay? It's a spray. And so when the glass moves, the iridescence separates. And we call that the stretch effect. Some pieces have a lot of stretch effect, some pieces have a little bit of stretch effect, some pieces have no stretch effect. Depends on how long it's in the heat and what happens to it afterwards. Once it has been reheated, it goes to the finisher. The finisher is in charge of creating the final shape in which the piece of glass is supposed to be. Let's take this piece here again. This came out of the mold as a bowl. Okay, this is a footed bowl. All right, it's got 3 feet on it. It appears in finished form in the Imperial catalog as a bowl with various top treatments. It also appears as a plate. So this bowl was laid down by the finisher until he got it into a plate. You'll see that there's fabulous stretch effect here because he worked on this glass for a while, okay? When I say a while, a matter of minutes, okay? I mean, not hours. This stuff was all very fast. But you get great stretch effect when you stretch the glass out to turn it into a different form. This big red plate, which everybody's been drooling over since I set it up the other day, I've had several people tell me they're going to try to steal it. When this came out of the mold, this came out of the punch bowl mold. So it was a punch bowl, okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I think the finisher was a pretty talented guy. He had to, remember this was snapped up on the back side and on a long pole that somebody was carrying around. When they got ready to give it to the finisher, they handed the pole to the handle, whatever you want to call it, to the finisher, and the finisher put it on his bench, and he started rolling it. Okay, and he had to roll it constantly. Otherwise, if you don't roll it, the glass goes out around. So he's got to roll it with one hand, or maybe he had a helper rolling it, and he's got to use his tongs and whatever else he's going to use with the other hand to bring the edge of that bowl down until he gets it created into a plate. It's likely that this plate went back to the glory hole a couple of times to be reheated so that it would be the right temperature for him to continue to work on it. How do we know that? We know that because of the color. The color is deep, deep red. And as you may know, to make red glass, years ago at least, you use gold in the mixture. When you put gold in the mixture, the glass that comes out of the pot comes out yellow. It is by cooling it and reheating it in a particular oxidation level that creates the red color. This piece obviously went back to the glory hole a few times, okay, because of the deep, deep red. If you take this piece, this was made by Fenton, by the way, and I had the pleasure and the honor of talking with Frank Fenton when he was alive, and Frank said, we always insisted that our red glass was deep, deep red. And I have pieces of Fenton red glass that are almost black. They're so deep. Imperial, on the other hand, was perfectly happy to have red glass that looked like this. Okay, most of us would call this amberina, right? But here again, this is where the snap was. So this didn't necessarily go back into the glory hole. This part went back in, but the guy who was doing it cheated a little bit. He didn't put this all the way in. So this stayed yellow. Imperial was perfectly fine with this, by the way. I have lots of Imperial glass red glass, and almost all their glass has a yellow base. They don't have any problem with that. But not Mr. Fenton. Mr. Fenton wanted red through and through, as dark as you could get it. So that's how you make stretch glass. Mold it, iridize it, reheat it, give it to the finisher. The finisher changes the shape into whatever it's supposed to be. When he's done with it, he puts it in the leer to cool, and X number of hours later, you get a piece of stretch glass out. Okay? So that's how it's made. When was it made? Imperial introduced stretch glass in the form of a grizzled light shade in 1912. It was different because it was made using this process I just described as opposed to the process they used to make their carnival glass lampshades. So it looked different. It was marketed as grizzled glass. It was a big deal. In 1916, Northwood and Fenton both introduced extensive lines of stretch glass using the same technology, the same process. So in 1916, stretch glass really came to market in a big way. By the 1920s, there were 7 more companies that were making stretch glass. Those companies were Central Glass, Diamond Glassware Company, Fenton I've already mentioned, Imperial, Jeanette made some stretch glass, Lancaster made some stretch glass, Northwood made stretch glass until the mid to late 1920s when they went out of business. If you remember, Mr. Northwood died, and he was pretty much the glue that held that company together. Soon after he passed away, the company went out of business. And by the way, when they went out of business, as normally happens with a glass company, the molds, which are the most valuable asset of the company, the molds get sold to other people. So in this case, some of the Northwood molds were sold to Fenton. And some of them may have been sold to somebody else. But the reason I mention that is because we find pieces of Fenton stretch glass that are made in Northwood molds. And for a while, we were scratching our heads saying, wait a minute, how did Fenton get a mold that was exactly like the Northwood mold? And then some research was done, and they looked at the auction results and whatever, and they found out that, oh yeah, Fenton cherry-picked some of these molds, and so you got it in jade green made by Northwood, but you got it in velvet rose, stretch glass made by Fenton. Okay, Northwood, U.S. Glass made stretch glass at Factory K in Pittsburgh, the King factory. There was some belief for a while that maybe there was some stretch glass made here in the Tiffin factory that was part of U.S. Glass at that time, but all evidence seems to point to the fact that there wasn't stretch glass made here. It was made in Factory K. And then the last company to make stretch glass was the Vineland Flint Glass Company in Vineland, New Jersey. That became better known as Durand. And Durand made fabulous art glass, of course, but they also made stretch glass. So those are the 9 companies, okay? Stretch glass was made until the early 1930s when the effects of the economic depression were kicking in. People didn't have money to buy stuff like stretch glass anymore. It was fairly expensive to make. Everybody stopped making it, and they converted their plants over to make depression glass, what we call today depression era glass. There was no more stretch glass made until 1975. As I mentioned earlier, in 1974, the Stretch Glass Society was formed, and some of our founders were very good friends with Frank Fenton. And they went to Frank and they said, why don't you make some stretch glass for us? And Frank said, I don't know if we know how to make stretch glass anymore. We haven't made it since 1930, whatever. They said, well, we think you should try. So they made a turn of stretch glass in 1974 or 1975. Made it in 4 colors, and used 1 mold, but it came out in many different shapes. He let the finisher do whatever he wanted to do with the pieces. Frank donated that entire turn of stretch glass to the Stretch Glass Society for their 1975 convention, which was held in Williamstown, West Virginia, where Fenton was located. Every member who was there was given a piece from that run. All the rest of the pieces were put in an auction to raise money for the society, and they were sold to the members that were there. So it all stayed within the Stretch Glass Society. 1976, they made a little bit of stretch glass. If you can find a piece of stretch glass that's got the Fenton mark from 1976 on it, you've really accomplished something. It must have just been experimental. There are very, very, very few pieces of it known. No more stretch glass was made at Fenton until 1980. In 1980, Fenton celebrated their 75th anniversary. Their 75th anniversary catalog featured glass from the first 75 years that they had been in business. They decided to include Velva Rose stretch glass in that historic collection. This is a piece that was in that collection. This is a bell. It was made in 1980 by Fenton. I should mention, by the way, that from 1975 on, the Fenton stretch glass, almost all of it, is marked with the Fenton logo and the Fenton script inside of it. Sometimes there's a number under the logo that will say 75th, 80th, 90th anniversary, or sometimes there's a year, the two-digit number that will indicate what year it's made. But it was always that Fenton oval with the name Fenton in script. So in 1980, Fenton brought back Velva Rose stretch glass. It was in the catalog. The dealers loved it. The shoppers loved it. And from then on, until Fenton went out of business, they made stretch glass almost every year. They made it in about 30 different colors. Many of those colors are different colors than the original colors that were made in the early period. So we call it early period and late period. We're beginning to sort of downplay all of that because it's all stretch glass. And, you know, it used to be, well, this is new stretch glass. Well, there is no such thing as new stretch glass anymore. So it's old stretch glass. Having said that, let me just say this. Mosser, about 2 weeks ago, made a run of a turn of stretch glass for two of our members. Two of our members borrowed one of the molds that the Stretch Glass Society owns that was originally owned by Fenton to make stretch glass. And they hired Mosser to make stretch glass. They made a black stretch glass square bowl. I believe at last count there were 291 pieces made during that turn. And they will be marketing that glass on their own. If it is well received by the market, then it is likely that they will want to make some more. So we may have stretch glass being made again. But if it is, it'll be made by Mosser, and you'll just have to see how that story ends. Why was stretch glass made anyways? We had, even in 1912, even in 1916, even in 1920, we had lots of carnival glass in the market. In fact, they had an overabundance of carnival glass. That's how you probably know this story. Carnival glass wasn't called carnival glass when it was made. It got that name because the folks that made it made too much of it. And they had a whole bunch of it in inventory, and they needed to get rid of it. And the people that seemed to be interested in buying it were the carnival hawkers. And so they started selling it to the hawkers to use in their games at the carnivals and to give away as prizes. And then that's where it got the name carnival glass from. So there was lots of carnival glass in the marketplace. Why did we need another type of glass? Well, in the 1920s, taste started to change. Consumer taste started to change. Queen Victoria was dead. The Victorian age was over. People were sick and tired of having everything coated with silver and gold. And if you think about what kind of furniture was made in the 1920s, it was simple furniture. It was stickly furniture, for example. It was furniture where you could actually see the grains of the wood. And so this glass is glass where you can actually see the color of the glass, and you can see the workmanship of the iridescence. Those of you who are familiar with carnival glass know that on a lot of pieces of carnival glass, you can see the iridescence, but you have to turn the piece of glass bottom side up and look at the bottom of it to figure out what color the glass is underneath. You don't have to turn stretch glass bottom side up to see what color it is. All you have to do is look at the stretch glass. So that's a little bit about why it was made. We've talked about who made it, and let's talk about what they were trying to accomplish, what those companies were trying to accomplish, what market demand were they trying to appeal to. They were trying to appeal to the home entertaining and home decorating market. And so you'll find lots of pieces here that you would use if you were having lunch with someone, if you were having someone in your home for lunch, or if you were serving hors d'oeuvres, for example, or if you were decorating your home and you wanted a new vase, you wanted a vase in a certain color, maybe you wanted a candy jar in a certain color, whatever. Let me just point out a few of these. This was not made in the 1920s. This was made after 1980 by Fenton. This is an Epergne, which is, a Victorian style, maybe pre-Victorian style. But Fenton made 13 different colors of Epergnes, and most of them were made for QVC. They are in relatively short supply today. They're not rare, but there are certain colors which are very hard to find. But this is a perfect example of a piece that was made, obviously, just for decorating. Okay. Most of the people that I talk to that have an Epergne, they don't even put flowers in it. Okay. I mean, an original Epergne, you're supposed to have flowers in here and fruit down here, or flowers and flowers. Most people just have these Epergnes sitting around. They don't have any flowers in them at all. So it made, for home entertaining, it made lots of nice bowls. This is an imperial bowl. They made lots of flower vases. This is a U.S. glass flower vase that has been decorated. Now this is stenciled on, okay? This was done after the glass cooled, obviously. The iridescence was put on while it's hot. All the decorating is done after it's cool. This is called mandarin yellow. And they did lots of pieces like this, comports, for nuts or candy or mints or whatever you want. They also made a lot of pieces of glass like this. Does anybody know what the primary purpose of this piece of glass is for in the 1920s?
Whipped cream.
Whipped cream, you're very close.
It's a mayonnaise dish.
Mayonnaise, that's it. Mayonnaise was a big deal in the 1920s. This is a mayonnaise. There's probably some other mayonnaise. This would qualify as a mayonnaise. So they made a lot of mayonnaise. They also, so in terms of luncheon pieces, they made plates. They made sherbets and sherbet underplates. Sometimes the underplates were indented for the sherbet on the side so you could put cookies or something on the plate. They made tumblers. Here's a couple examples of tumblers. They made pitchers. They made lemonade mugs. They made cups and saucers. Cups and saucers are pretty hard to find today. And I don't think it's because there was a shortage of them made. I think it was because they were used and abused, and they no longer exist. So they made cups and saucers. So you could, here's a sherbet, for example, a sherbet in an underplate. This was made by Northwood. Here's the little sherbet cup, and you could put, whatever you wanted else on that. Now maybe you got your sandwich on here and you got your sherbet in here at the same time. Maybe you got a piece of cake on here or something like that. And then they made some specialty pieces. This is if you're going to own one piece of stretch glass, this is the piece you should own. This is a lemon server. People on eBay think this is a ring holder, but it's not. It's a lemon server. And Fenton made these. They made them in almost every color glass that they made. So you can find these in topaz, Florentine green, Celeste blue, Persian pearl, wisteria, tangerine, and maybe I've left something out. These are very nice to use. We use them all the time at our house. We use the green ones for lime slices, and we use the yellow ones for lemon slices, and our guests get a big kick out of it. So this glass was made to be used. The flower vases and whatever, yes, they sat on a table or they sat on top of a cabinet or something, but they were still made to be used. This was not carnival glass, which was made to be mounted on the wall. Okay, remember that one of the purposes of carnival glass was to reflect the light out of the gas lamps in the dark Victorian homes. Stretch glass was not made to be hung on the wall. Stretch glass was made to be used on the table. And apparently, based on the shortage of stretch glass in the market today, apparently a lot of it was used, and I guess we have to conclude that a lot of it was broken. We do find hoards of it periodically. Auctioneers are pretty good at unearthing unknown collections of it and whatever from time to time, but we do not find large quantities of it. That's kind of brings us to it must have been broken. When you get a chance after I get done talking up here, I invite you to come up and look at these photographs that we have. This one in particular, this is an actual table setting by one of our members who likes blue. Her whole house is decorated in blue. She has blue wallpaper. She has blue linens on the table here. She has blue curtains at the windows, and she collects blue stretch glass. And this is this was not done just for this picture. This is a picture of her getting ready to entertain someone for dinner. So stretch glass is very usable. You'll see here's another place setting of it using mostly pieces of imperial. And these pictures up here, we had these recently taken by a photographer. They were done in my home. And we purposely put food on the plates and coffee in the coffee cup, and we put flowers in the vases and whatever to show that stretch glass is just as usable today as it was in 1920. So I invite you to come up and take a look at those. Now, let's just talk a little bit more about some of the colors and some of the treatments. So stretch glass was made in translucent glass, opaque glass, and slag glass. The slag glass is the most unusual and easily the most difficult to find. U.S. Glass in Factory K, Pittsburgh, made the slag glass and iridized it. Here's a piece from their line. This is coral, and you see it is iridized. There's not much iridescence on the outside. When you see this vase sitting on a shelf or in a cabinet in an antique mall, you're not going to look at it and go, oh, there's a piece of stretch glass, because you're not going to be able to see the stretch on it. You're going to have to take it down, and you're going to have to look inside and say, oh yeah, there is some stretch in there. What's even more bizarre is that U.S. Glass made some candle holders, which are sort of a narrow version of the Mae West candle holder. And in most of those cases, they only iridize the underside of the candle holder. So it's the side that you can't see. That's where the iridescence is. This slag glass, here's another piece. This is U.S. Glass Pearl Gray. See the beautiful slag on the bottom? And beautiful slag on the inside that's been iridized. Yeah, these are, I'm not going to lead you to believe that in the next visit to the flea market, you're going to find a couple of these. I hope you do. This is also U.S. glass. This is not slag, but this is OPEG. This is called Old Rose. Very nice vase. They made, U.S. Glass made a very big line of vases. Here's jade green. Again, no iridescence on the outside. Iridescence is all on the inside. This was probably intended to be a console bowl. So if you think of that, a console bowl sits on top of a buffet. You have two candle holders next to it, so where you see the iridescence is right here. So that's where they put it. But that doesn't help us when we're out looking for it in a shop. Now, U.S. Glass also did some decorating on theirs. Other people did decorating also, but U.S. Glass did some pretty creative stuff. This is crystal stretch glass with very much Art Deco black stripes on it. And there are a number of pieces known with that particular decoration on them. This is another creation of U.S. Glass. This is called Pomona. This is all done with paint, okay, other than the iridescence. So the way this piece is made, this is a piece of clear glass, by the way. If you break this glass, it's clear inside, okay? We don't need to do that because if you look right through the middle of the bottom, there's one little spot of clear glass that's left that didn't get painted on, okay? But, so this was made iridized on the top and flattened out while it was hot, and then it was cooled, and then this stencil design was put on the back of this piece, and then this yellow paint was put on top of that. So you get that, and it looks like all of this is under the iridescence. Well, it is under the iridescence, except it's also under the glass. Okay, so that's called Pomona. Now, Pomona was also made in a second color combination. This is the red-blue combination. And if you're having trouble seeing some of these, they'll be out here. You can come up and see them afterwards. But you see how the blue stencil and the reddish burgundy, whatever color you want to call it, on the particular piece. Now sometimes they just painted flowers or geometric decorations on it. So this is U.S. Glass, pink, and these flowers have been painted on with a brush. They probably was done at the factory. They probably had a decorating department. We know for sure that Fenton had a decorating department, and the decorations are fairly well documented, so we know what decorations were done at the factory and what decorations were done somewhere else. Sometimes stretch glass was sold to decorating companies for them to decorate. Sometimes stretch glass was sold to silver plate companies, and they would encase the stretch glass with silver plate and then sell it as their own product. You find it many different ways. Before we leave the decorating topic, so this is called cumula, C-U-M-U-L-A, cumula. Sounds a lot to me like cumulus, clouds. I don't know if that's what they intended it to be, but it sure as heck looked like clouds. Why they didn't make the background blue instead of green, I don't know, but somebody obviously decided that this green and white was going to be a good combination. Here's the sherbet. Again, iridized only on the top, painted on the back, okay? Another product of U.S. Glass. And then you get into the gold edges. Here's a real fancy piece. It's got a lot of gold trim on it. It's interesting to find out how they did this. If you look at this cover, you'll see that the gold is actually three-dimensional. It's got a design in it. It looks like lace, basically. And the way you do that decoration is you lay a strip of glue down here that has this design in it, and then you paint over it. Okay? So even if the gold chips away, the glue design is still here. We had a member once who, maybe we had more than one, but we had one that I know, who had a piece of this and the gold was pretty well worn away, and he decided to finish taking the gold off. And when he got the gold off, then he was left with the glue, which looked even worse than having part of the gold. And, but he thought he had a really rare piece of stretch glass because it had this design on the top of it. So he brought it to our convention and said, look, this is really unusual. And we said, yeah, why did you take the gold off? And he was like, oh, yeah, I did take the gold off. Well, not a good idea. All right, let's talk about some colors. In the beginning, Fenton came out primarily with pastel colors. Florentine green, Celeste blue, Velvet rose, crystal, or Persian pearl, as Fenton called it, and let's see, I already said Velvet rose, okay, and topaz, and then a little bit later they added wisteria. This is a wisteria cologne, very dark purple. Fenton spelled wisteria the unconventional way, W-I-S-T-A-R-I-A, which is a correct spelling of the word, but it's not the spelling that most of us are used to. Then they added colors like aquamarine. This was added towards the end of the stretch glass period, not a great deal of it around. They added this color. This is tangerine. This is one of the most popular colors of stretch glass out there. People love this color. And it does work very nicely at Halloween. You put some tangerine and some black stretch glass together on your table, and maybe work in a couple pieces of uranium glass and then hide a black light somewhere, and you got a pretty crazy table. This is tangerine. They also made ruby, which is what this is, and they made a very, very dark cobalt that they called royal blue. I don't happen to have a piece of royal blue with me, but it is similar to this. It's somewhat darker color than this. There's very little royal blue made. We're not sure if it was entirely experimental or if it was just a short run, maybe done towards the end of when they were making stretch glass. Other companies had their own proprietary colors. Some of the smaller companies just settled for blue and green, blue, green, and crystal, blue, green, crystal, and topaz. Maybe they threw a purple in there somewhere along the way. Other companies got a little more creative, and they started giving their glass specific color names. So there is Tut Blue out there. There's Harding Blue, named for President Harding. There is Nile Green, which is a particular color that U.S. Glass made. There are lots of other colors. Now, here's an Imperial. Imperial made a number of different colors. They named all their colors with the word ice in them. So this is green ice. Okay, this is green ice. This is blue ice. This is ruby ice. And they made iris ice, which was a crystal glass. They made, I'm drawing a blank. They made a pink color that was called rose ice. And there might have been, and amber ice. Here's a piece of amber ice. As with anything that's collectible these days, not all colors are created equal. Not all shapes are created equal. So a wisteria perfume is a lot better than a blue bowl. Okay? I probably don't have to tell you that. But this red plate is a lot better than every other piece of glass I got up here. There's only about 3 of these known. I'm not even sure there's 3. I know there's 2 because I've seen them together at the same time, so I know there's 2. I'm not sure if there's a 3rd one or not. We've never been able to confirm that a particular collector has one or doesn't have one. And it's possible some collector that we don't even know of has one. But I will tell you, there are not very many of them. So, you know, it's when you go to figure out the price or the value, however you want to look at it, of a piece of stretch glass, it is a combination of the shape, the color, the size, and the maker. So a blue bowl by Diamond is not necessarily the same price as a blue bowl by Fenton. Okay, although in this day and age, most blue bowls are pretty much comparable. But for example, there are pieces like bonbons, covered bonbons, where the value is vastly different depending on whether one company made it or the other company made it. Okay, so just be aware of that. When Fenton got back in the business of making stretch glass, they made about 30 new colors. So there's all kinds of new colors that Fenton made. This is one of the purples they made. This is called Violet. This was made for the Stretch Glass Society as a convention souvenir that we sold to our members. It's officially known as a card tray, but I think most of our members probably use it as a to put candy on. So some old colors also reappeared as new colors. So this was green ice. That was made in the 20s by Imperial. This is Stiegel Green. This was made by Fenton in 2000s. When you put them next to each other, they are virtually identical. Fenton never made a color like this back in the 20s. This is an Imperial console set. This is an Imperial mayonnaise. This is a Fenton water pitcher and a water goblet. So some colors come back around. This is a new piece or a late period piece of Imperial stretch glass. It's very shiny. Some would argue that it's probably not really supposed to be stretch glass, but it's got enough stretch effect on it that we are willing to include it in stretch glass. Now, Imperial also made a line of glass during the 20s called Imperial Jewels. They were, with their Imperial Jewels line, they were specifically attempting to compete with Tiffany. They double iridized those pieces of glass. They were more expensive to make. They were more expensive for the dealers to buy, and the dealers charged extra money for them when they sold them. This is a piece of Imperial Jewels. It has beautiful stretch effect on it. It has beautiful deep color. This is a hair receiver, by the way. You ladies know that you used to save all your hair, right? You should go in the hair receiver. And then I don't know, I guess there were various uses of it. I've actually seen artwork that's done with someone's hair framed,
Or they made jewelry out of it.
or they made jewelry out of it. Okay. So, oh, here's another interesting piece. This is also made by Imperial. This is dark purple, probably amethyst ice. This is a pin tray. Some people believe this is a paper clip tray, which it could be. What we do know about this is that this was made as a, I believe, as a Christmas gift to all the Imperial employees. There aren't a whole lot of these that survive, by the way. It's a big chunk of glass. It's very easy to chip when you drop it. This one, I think, actually, yeah, this one actually has a pretty good chunk out of it right there. But it has the Imperial mark, and it says Imperial Glass Company, Bel Air, Ohio, USA on the side of it. It's kind of a cool piece, and it's an example of a very unusual piece. So, they made a lot of pieces that were useful, as I mentioned, entertaining, home decorating. I'll say just a couple of words about this up here. You get a better idea if you look at the picture behind it. But these are the pieces from Fenton's vanity line. These were made for presumably the lady of the house. Colognes, powder puff, powder puff, powder puff. They made many sizes of colognes. They made it in about 5 or 6 different colors. These pieces are very desirable. They're in great demand. The perfume cologne collectors, of course, want them. The stretch glass people want them. The Fenton people, Fenton glass people want them. Everybody wants them. But they're very beautiful. They made glass trays to put underneath them, which are very hard to find these days. And for the man of the house, they made a shaving mug. So there are Celeste Blue and Topaz shaving mugs known. Interestingly, all the shaving mugs that we are aware of, which are not very many, were all found in Wisconsin. So we don't know that there was a special order for some barbershop in Wisconsin. You can imagine why this is happening. But all the shaving mugs that are found and have been found in the wild were all found in Wisconsin. There's got to be something going on in Wisconsin. Now, I'm trying to convince you that you should use this stuff in your house. And you're saying to me, as the folks in the back did when I asked them, hey, how much of this stuff did you ever see? And they said, oh, we had a few pieces that we handled, but, we didn't find very much of it. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's more stretch glass available today than there's ever been. And why is that? It is because in recent years, a number of very large collections have come to market, and they have been distributed not into the wild. I wouldn't say they've gone into the wild, okay? But they have gone into both dealers' hands and collectors' hands. If you walk around this show out here, there's probably, I'm going to say there's probably 40 or 4, I'll stick with 40. 40 pieces of stretch glass for sale out there, okay? So you can buy it. Now, you're not going to buy that red plate, okay? Don't walk out of here saying, I got to have that red plate or I'm not going to collect stretch glass. What you're going to be able to buy is you're going to be able to buy serving bowls, you're going to be able to buy plates, you're going to be able to buy candle holders. They made thousands of candle holders. Fenton made dozens of different sizes and styles candle holders over the year. Most of the other companies made candle holders. Console sets were a big deal, so almost everybody made console sets. So you're going to find console bowls, you're going to find serving bowls, you're going to find plates, you're going to find candle holders. If you get lucky, you'll find a sugar and a creamer. You'll find tumblers, you'll find pitchers. You'll certainly find this little lemon server. This, despite me saying this is the consummate piece of stretch glass to own, it's not the most expensive piece of stretch glass. These sell commonly for 25 bucks, 20 bucks, okay? If you get online and you look at a stretch glass auction by Burns Auction Service down in Mississippi, or you look at Jim Rhoda's auctions out of upstate New York, or you look at Jim Seek's auctions out of Iowa, or Scott Sheffield's auctions out of Kentucky. Those are the and Randy Clark out of Dexter City, Ohio. Those are the 5 auctioneers that sell the most stretch glass. Okay, they've been in the stretch glass business for a while. Burns has been in the stretch glass business probably longer than anybody, but Sheffield is the relative newcomer in the stretch glass front. But Randy Clark's been selling stretch glass for years. Jim Seek's been selling stretch glass for years. So there was an auction on July 6th. Rhoda had an auction on July 6th, had 439 lots of stretch glass in it. Some of that stretch glass sold for $15 a lot. Okay, a lot was maybe a candy jar or a bowl or a plate or something like that. Burns is going to have an auction at the Stretch Glass Convention, which is August 15, 16, and 17 in Denver, Pennsylvania, about 8 hours east of here. We welcome you to come. We'll have hundreds of pieces of stretch glass on display. We'll do seminars there also. And Friday night, Burns will have an auction that has 350 lots of stretch glass in it, much of which came out of the collection of one of our founders. I've looked at the auction. I will tell you that there are some pieces in the auction that are going to sell, likely to sell for thousands of dollars. There are some pieces in the auction that are likely to sell for tens of dollars. So it's a nice assortment. But you can accumulate enough stretch glass so that if you have a favorite color, or you maybe have several favorite colors and you want to entertain around the holidays, you could probably get enough stretch glass to do a buffet table, or at least do part of a buffet table. We do a Christmas open house at our house, and we use all stretch glass on the table to serve the food. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's red, sometimes it's white like snow, sometimes it's a combination of all the above. We do dinner parties with our friends. If we know that a particular friend, if it's somebody's birthday or whatever, and we know they have a favorite color, we pull out the stretch glass in that color. Stretch glass was made in about 50 different colors. Now, when I say 50 different colors, I had 50 different color names, okay? But it was made in, let's just go through quick. So just using generic color names, it was made in red, blue, yellow, green, orange, purple, amber, pink, black, and white, okay? And then you can work in these ice colors. You know, for years people called this teal, people call this smoke. So, you know, you've got all the basic colors, and then in addition to all the basic colors, you've got all the variations. So Diamond's green is a little bit more blue, Fenton's green is a little bit more yellow, US Glass's green is opaque, somebody else's green is, you know, there's olive green, there's russet green, a lot of different colors, the whole color spectrum. If you don't believe it, take one of my cards, come over for a visit. I'll take you down to the stretch glass gallery, and you can see the cases of stretch glass arranged in the color of the color spectrum, and you'll see that there's something for everything. So we do encourage you to think about using it. You guys have been wonderful. I want to give you some time for Q&A, but before I do, I just want to tell you that we always have a special when we're doing this. We always offer you a membership in the Stretch Glass Society for $10. It's normally $18 a year if you get your newsletter by email. Today you get a membership for $10, and your membership is good until the end of 2025. So you're basically getting 18 months for about half price. So if you want that, I have the brochures up here. You fill one out, give me a $10 bill, you'll be all taken care of. But what questions do you have? Yes?
I'm probably not phrasing this correctly, but it's always seemed to be that in general, the pieces are kind of plain. In other words, they don't have a lot of impressed
Correct.
patterns like a carnival glass.
Correct. So that was on purpose. That was part of the let's get away from the Victorian era. Let's get into the craftsman area, if you're familiar with that. If you're familiar with that term, where the craftsman furniture was all very plain. This glass is designed to be plain. Now, it does have. It often has rays, like this piece does. I don't. Oh yes, I do have a piece that has diamonds in it. This piece has diamonds, optic diamonds. But what makes this so different from carnival glass is that all of these designs, almost all of them, are optic designs. So they're on the inside of the glass, and you look through the glass to see the design. That's the definition of an optic design. If this were carnival glass, these diamonds would be on the outside. The inside would be smooth. But yes, you're correct. It's almost always smooth. Here you've got optic panels. The panels are actually on the inside. You look through the glass, you can see the optic panels. So, good question.
Did other manufacturers beside U.S. Glass have the stenciled type decorations like is shown there?
Let me just think about that for a minute. Anybody else have stenciled decorations? I think the answer to that question is no. I think that's something that is unique to U.S. Glass. Some of the other companies, Fenton did paint on some of their glass, but it wasn't a stencil. And Northwood sometimes put painted flowers on some of their glass. Most of the other there's a little bit of Central that has painting on it, but we don't believe it was done at the factory. We believe it was done either by a decorating company or by a creative artist in the household, which was common back in those days. So I think, I think U.S. Glass has the monopoly on the stenciling. Yep. Anything else? Okay, then I guess we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much.